The rope burned against her wrists as the crate was kicked away, and for a single, endless heartbeat. She understood that this was how it ended, not on a battlefield, not with honor, but beneath a cracked gallows while a crowd held its breath. Dust drifted in the afternoon light. Someone in the back whispered her name like a prayer. She lifted her chin anyway, because fear was a luxury she could no longer afford. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who is listening. Her name was Mara Hale, and she had learned long ago how to stand still when everything inside her was screaming to run. The village square smelled of sun-baked earth and iron. Children were pressed behind their parents' legs, peering through fingers. Men with rifles shifted their weight, boots grinding stone. Above her, the beam creaked, the rope swayed. The silence felt heavier than any shouted accusation. Mara's mind did what it always did under pressure it catalogued. The knot was sloppy, the rope was old, the executioner's hands trembled. These details meant nothing now, but noticing them kept her upright, kept her human. She thought of the last message she'd sent, a few lines scribbled on a torn map and smuggled out with a runner at dawn. She had not expected an answer, she had only hoped. They had called her a traitor, a spy, a ghost who slipped through checkpoints and left nothing behind but questions and bodies. Some of it was true. Most of it was easier than admitting the real crime. She had refused to abandon people who weren't supposed to matter. She had broken orders to pull a wounded family from a crossfire, had traded her own extraction window for a convoy of refugees who would never know her name. The crowd murmured when the local commander stepped forward. He read the charges with a voice practiced in certainty. Each word landed like a stone. Mara listened without blinking. Somewhere beyond the square a breeze lifted, stirring prayer flags and carrying the smell of smoke from distant hills. Time thinned. She wondered, briefly, if courage always felt this lonely at the end. She thought she'd never see him again. She was wrong. A low thrum rolled across the square, almost too deep to be sound. Heads turned. The executioner hesitated, eyes flicking toward the road that cut through the village like a scar. Dust rose in a widening plume. Vehicles appeared dark, unmarked, moving with a purpose that did not ask permission. The first truck stopped, without skidding. Doors opened in unison. Men and women stepped out with the quiet precision of people who had learned to move as one. No insignia, no bravado, just presence. At their center walked a tall man with silver at his temples, and a gaze that weighed everything it touched. Colonel James Rourke did not raise his voice. He did not run. He crossed the square as if it already belonged to him, boots finding a rhythm on stone. The murmurs thinned to whispers, then to nothing. Weapons lowered by inches. It was not fear that stilled the air. It was recognition. Rourke stopped beneath the gallows and looked up at Mara. Their eyes met, and in that glance passed a lifetime of choices, orders given. Orders broken, lives saved in the narrow margins between. He saw the bruises on her wrists, the dried blood at her temple. He saw the steadiness she had held on to when the world tried to pry it from her. "Colonel," the local commander said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is an internal matter." Rourke nodded once. "It was," he said softly. He lifted a hand and one of his team produced a folder, edges worn, corners softened by use. Pages fluttered in the breeze. Names, dates, signatures, agreements inked in rooms far from this square, where consequences were abstract and courage was a word on paper. "This woman," Rourke continued, "was operating under my authority." He paused, letting the sentence settle. "And under my responsibility." A ripple passed through the crowd. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed, sharp and disbelieving. The executioner's fingers tightened on the rope. Rourke stepped closer to the beam. He reached out not to the knot, not yet, but to the space between the moment and what came next. "Stand down," he said, still calm. "There will be no execution today." The local commander's jaw flexed. Pride and fear wrestled behind his eyes. He gestured to his men, who shifted but did not advance. The standoff stretched, thin as wire. This was the moral edge, the place where law and justice rarely agreed. Mara felt it keenly, a pressure behind her ribs. If Rourke pushed too hard, people would die. If he stepped back, she would. Rourke made his choice. He reached up and cut the rope. The sound was small, a clean slice. A soft thud as the length fell away. but the effect was thunderous. Mara dropped to her knees, the crate skittering aside. Hands caught her before she hit the ground. Someone draped a jacket around her shoulders. Crowd surged, then froze again as Rourke turned, eyes sweeping the square. "No one fires," he said, and the way he said it made the sentence feel like a promise and a warning all at once. The local commander opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at the documents, at the vehicles, at the faces of people who had come to watch a hanging and found themselves witnessing a reckoning. Slowly, painfully, he nodded. Rourke knelt beside Mara. For the first time, his voice softened. "You did good," he said. "I'm sorry it took so long." She laughed, a broken sound that surprised her. "You always were," she managed, "right on time." They moved then, fluid and coordinated. Medics checked her injuries. Someone began to clap a single, hesitant beat. Another joined. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Soon the sound filled the square, not loud but steady, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. As they reached the vehicles, a child stepped forward and pressed a wilted flower into Mora's hand. The engine started. Dust rose. The gallows stood empty behind them, a useless shadow in the sun. Later, as the village receded and the road unspooled ahead, Mara leaned her head back and watched the light flicker across the ceiling. The weight she had been carrying loosened, not gone, but shared. She understood then that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act anyway, and sometimes the grace to accept help when it arrived. Rourke stood at the front, hands braced, eyes on the horizon. He had cut a rope, yes. But he had also cut through something else. Complacency. Silence. The easy lie that said one life was expendable for the sake of order. Because kindness doesn't vanish. It waits, and it finds its way back. And somewhere behind them, in a square washed clean by wind and light, a beam creaked in the emptiness, remembering the day it failed to hold a woman who refused to disappear. If this story moved you, share where you're watching from and what courage means to you. Subscribe for more human stories of strength, choice, and the moments that change everything, because these are the stories worth whispering and worth hearing together.